Zen. Tonight's Dharma talk is given by Myung-Jin and San.
You've probably heard that you have Buddha nature. You may have even been told that you're already a Buddha. It may have been me or my teacher who was to have said that. You might hear that ordinary mind is the way. And you've undoubtedly heard that relying on scriptures and chanting the Buddha's name is next to worthless as far as seeing your true nature, that is, the nature of a Buddha. You might also have heard that there's no such thing as deluded mind. We might put it into the context, as has been said elsewhere by someone else. We all have the inherent ability to play piano. But without practice, the quality of the playing might leave something to be desired. So you've heard all these things. You may say to yourself, okay, well, there's no deluded mind, and I have ordinary mind. I use it to think every day, just ordinary. And I hate reading the sutras, and, chanting is right out. And so, having this Buddha nature thing and already being a Buddha, I'm good with that. So, there I am. I'm good. I'm all set. Done. And in context, all of those statements about having Buddha nature and being a Buddha and, no value in reading sutras or chanting, in their own context, none of them is necessarily incorrect. Basing your entire practice, or possibly lack thereof, on any or all of those statements is probably incorrect. As we learned from various suttas recently, the Buddha might refer to you as foolish man, even. He didn't take kindly to people twisting the Dharma and taking all of those statements and knitting them together and cherry-picking what you want to hear that fits your own mood. Yeah, he would probably call you foolish man. But if you are already Buddha, then why practice? It's actually something that Dogen tackled at some point or another. His context was in a temple, and, it was 1,000 years ago or whatever. So it was a little different situation than we have now. But it's food for thought. If we're all of these things, then why practice? What if my ordinary mind isn't deluded mind? All interesting questions. Chinul says, the deluded thoughts are originally quiet and the outside world is originally empty. In the place where all dharmas are empty exists the marvelous knowing, which is not dark. The mind of marvelous knowing, which is empty and quiet, is your original face. This is also the Dharma recognition that has been mysteriously transmitted through all the Buddhas in the three worlds and all the ancestors and Dharma teachers. Continuing, practitioners in our time often say, and this is going back to Chinul's time, not our time right now, but it might be somewhat universal. Practitioners in our time often say, if one is able to look into one's Buddha nature clearly, the vow and altruistic behaviors will naturally be realized. I do not think that is the case. To see clearly one's Buddha nature is to realize that sentient beings and the Buddha are equal, and that there is no distinction between me and others. However, I worry that if one does not make the vow of compassion, i.e. the Bodhisattva vows, they will stagnate in a state of lethargy. So, there's a reason to practice. Chinul is ostensibly the founder of our tradition in the Korean San lineage. And his thing, our thing, is sudden awakening, gradual cultivation. There are other schools that are either. The Linji school is sudden awakening. The Soto school is gradual awakening. And I brought this up to a Soto teacher once, and his thought on it was, well, you walk through fog or you get a bucket dumped on you. Either way, you're still wet. A little bit more Chinul here. The exposition of the Avatamsaka Sutra says, the nature of wisdom being calm, it needs to be guarded by the vow. Therefore, in the deluded state before the awakening, the strength of the mind is dark and weak, and thus is unable to realize the vow. However, once one experiences the initial awakening, one will be able to sympathize with the suffering of the sentient beings through one's discriminative wisdom, and thus exercise one's compassion and make a vow and practice the Bodhisattva path according to one's capacity, which will gradually complete one's awakened behaviors. How could this not be joyful? I think we're seeing where this all goes. We may have, in air quotes, Buddha nature. And maybe we are conceptually already Buddha, at least have the capacity to be Buddha. But unless we practice those scales, it's just going to be a bunch of noise. My teacher always used the analogy of boiling water for sudden awakening. So, once water is on heat and it's going, and the temperature is going up and up and up and up and up, and then suddenly it hits 212 degrees Fahrenheit, or 100 Celsius if you prefer, and bang, it's boiling. Suddenly. To which I added, yes, and in order to keep it at that temperature, at that boiling point, then you need to keep applying the heat so that it stays there. So, again, why practice? And in another light, how does the monk who goes off into the mountains and lives as a hermit, how is he practicing? And how is he acting in such a way that he's saving all beings? Our practice is the actualization of our Buddha nature. It's putting our Buddha nature into action, concrete, solid action. I've said before, if you want to be a Buddha, do Buddha stuff. If you want to be a piano player, do piano player stuff. If you want to be a baseball player, do baseball player stuff. It's the function that's appropriate to that situation. If you're on a baseball diamond, playing scales is incorrect function, no doubt, unless you're the guy playing the organ. Dun, 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 dun. But I digress. In that case, he would be the organ player. That would be his correct function. If you're out in left field and someone hits the ball at you and you go, dun, 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 incorrect function. Dogen says, this present continuous practice is nothing other than just committing oneself to continuous practice for no other reason than to practice continuously. Activity, expression, correct function in a correct situation is all enlightened action. But, so why do we do that? Why bother? Seems like a lot of effort to, since I already have an ordinary mind, I probably don't have to make all this effort to do all these things. But why do we practice? As has been said, I believe it was Dogen again, we practice with no gaining notion, as in, we sit just to sit. We don't think that sitting is necessarily going to turn us into a Buddha, as Matsu did when Huairong chastised him by polishing a brick, saying he was going to turn it into a mirror, and Matsu realizing that sitting alone is not going to turn him into a Buddha. It's the action. It's what we do to the best of our capacity, as Chinul says, to go out and save all sentient beings, help all sentient beings, help everyone that you run into that needs help on any given day. That's why we practice. That is our practice. It's not just sitting on a cushion. It's not just reading. It's not just chanting. Our practice is to go out into the marketplace with outstretched arms and help all sentient beings.